the meeting to order. Everybody's here and it's 5 o'clock. So we're signing the commitments,
Warrants.
the warrants.
You need a cricket background noise or something.
Something like that.
Look at the tree frogs peeping away.
Call it to order and want to get going, or?
You did?
Yeah, I already called it to order. I'm waiting for you guys to finish signing the bills there.
I think they are. Well, Tommy's got the.
You all
You're all
set?
set? Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were still doing it.
No,
Oh,
I gave him all the time.
okay. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
I did. I didn't have any changes.
Okay, I didn't have any changes either.
I'll make a
So,
motion to accept.
okay, I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. So I'm gonna sign this one.
Thank you.
All right, so Tatter and Howard Engineering, pilot study, new treatment plant for iron and manganese.
Yes. So I have a whole bunch of updates for you. So I'm starting with the iron manganese at Sears Street. The first one we have is the well 5 replacement project. First, the tanker spill we were speaking about. So we have our pre-construction conference on site Thursday. They've had some supply issues, which is why we're a little bit behind where we thought we'd be with that construction. So when they come Thursday, they're supposed to have a construction schedule for us showing completion, but my understanding is the below ground materials will be received this month. And so we're kind of have this kickoff on Thursday with the idea that shortly thereafter, the pitless adapter and the pipe will be on site so that we can proceed with the below ground work. So that's the well 5 piece. Are there any questions on that before I roll the iron manganese?
So how are they gonna drill this one?
So that well's already in place. This was set up over 2 contracts.
Yeah,
So the first contract was completed last year. Last summer they put in the replacement well, but the piping, the pitless, and the controls were part of contract 2, which was previously awarded, and we're now waiting for them to finish that construction.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I never really heard the final numbers what that well was producing.
Oh, good question.
That was a long
They-
time ago. I printed that out too.
Yeah, I think 250 gallons per minute sounds right. It was this.
Geez, that's all, huh?
Well, that's what our permitted capacity is. So in order for us to permit that as a replacement well, we have to design it and pump it at the same capacity as the well we're replacing. So it's not that there was a shortage of water or poor production out of the
Well,
well.
when we first drilled that well, we had an 8-inch well out there, and it was just for the test well. And we were pumping 300 gallons a minute. And we expected to get a lot more water at that time than the 300 gallons when we put the larger casing in. And they hammered it in instead of doing a pull down like they usually do. And they packed the ground so tight that it dropped the production down to 250 gallons a minute, which was less than we got out of an 8-inch well. We would have been better off leaving the 8-inch well in there, because that was delivering more water. So at the time, they had already bought the motor, the pump, and they were just gonna throttle it, just put a valve on it. And I said, oh, no way, you're not doing that, because you're gonna be pumping, for the next 20 years against a head, which is gonna burn all kinds of electricity. So we made them order another pump, and they put that in. So that well should have been, designed, or I would think the capacity should have been what it originally was. They made a mistake when they hammered it in, and they ended up with 250 gallons a minute. Are you sure that that's all that well is doing? Is 250 instead of 300?
We didn't test it beyond that. So we were kind of working within, the permit. So a replacement well, the permitting is much easier, you can kind of get through. We hit delays on this one with permitting as is, but if we were to go at higher capacity, we would have had to treat it as a new source, and that permitting could be 2+ years. So that's kind of why we recommended back at the beginning of this project, let's get it as a replacement well. We didn't strain it beyond what the permit is, so we don't know that, we're not saying that the aquifer or the construction of the well is the limiting factor. That's just what we could permit, so that's what it was tested and designed to. We did put a high flow screen in there, so there's a little bit of headroom in terms of the well construction and design, but we can't really pump it above that without, a new permit. But that being said, if in the future we found ourselves in a position where we want to try to get a little bit more out of it, it would theoretically be possible without doing a new well to go out there, do a new test, permit it through DEP, and put a larger pump in there and get more water out of that well. So we didn't restrict.
I would have thought they'd test it just to see what it can produce.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Under the.
That's why I had asked a few times, we never could get an answer, what it was producing. I was hoping we were gonna be producing 500 gallons a minute or something.
Yeah, we didn't really stress it beyond what the permit allowed.
That's a shame that we're being limited by a piece of paper, not by what's in the ground, not what can safely be taken out, because if you measure the drawdown from, 50 feet and 100 feet away, and you find out that we can be doing 300 gallons a minute, and there's plenty of water there, but now because somebody changed the original permit that we had for 300 gallons a minute, they changed it to 250, only because somebody putting the well in screwed it up. And now they're saying, well, if you want the other 50 gallons that you were entitled to in the beginning, now it's, you have to spend all this money and do all this testing. That's really baloney.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, I'm sure no one back then realized how tricky it was going to become in the future, because now all these permits, they're, public notification. So the watersheds all come out, and, you have the interest groups who all get to
But this is all dollars that would cost the ratepayers, this is big money for something that was already approved years ago, so they make you spend it all over again. It's just wasting money, with the cost of everything these days.
Yeah,
That's just ridiculous. So,
yeah, I feel you.
So, okay. I've said my piece.
I don't disagree with anything you said. We're just kind of where we are now with it. But that being said, if in the future your needs were that you need to pull more from here and less from other places, or your demand goes up and you need to relook at your Water Management Act and request more total flow, that is a potential source to investigate before looking for, say, a new property, all depending on water quality, especially if you continue to invest on the site, kind of segueing into the iron and manganese piece. We did submit to DEP and ultimately get approval from Mass DEP for the full-scale piloting of iron and manganese. So that is an accepted pilot test proposal. So the next step, once funded, would be to actually conduct the pilot test for both Norman Ave and Sears Street for iron and manganese removal. And that included biological as well as a green sand plus. So we would pilot both technologies, and we would do so at both sites to make sure that any differences in water quality between the two sites are captured by the pilot. And then that will allow you to select the most cost-effective treatment alternative for future treatment plan at that site. So there is a possibility that if you continue to invest and put that treatment plant in, then maybe there is a point down the road where you see what more we can get out of well 5.
What we've always found is that the iron and the manganese has always been lowest here, and it gets higher as it goes through Norman Avenue. Norman Avenue's got a lot of ferrocite, so.
Yeah, well, DEP, ultimately we were going to try to test at one site instead of both, but they were arguing that because iron was higher at one site and the manganese was higher at the other, you may have noticed that we kind of submitted. So that was one of their comments, was that although we felt that the data would have allowed us to draw conclusions, they wanted us to pilot for both at both sites and get the worst case for both.
This one here used to have hardly any iron, or ferrous iron, or manganese
Station
in
4
it.
is still low, but it's not near the peat bogs either. Like Station 1 and Station 2 are right on top of the bogs. So that when we pull the surface water down, now you're pulling from the bogs themselves, and you pull in all the iron and manganese.
And it'd be interesting to see how the new well 5 works, especially, early on, we'd expect lower levels of iron and manganese, and then as you continue to, develop it and use it, you might see those levels start to maybe match what some of the neighborhoods are, or maybe never. You won't really know until you start pumping it. That might relieve some pressure from the other wells here where you are, seeing high levels of iron and manganese.
Yeah.
We used to measure all the wells through Norman Avenue, Sears Street, out here, and we still have it on the GIS, the groundwater elevations.
No, we don't. So we're gonna try to go up before the leaves come in and see if we can't bring Deborah up and spot the things. But they were always hidden so the kids didn't mess with them, but being hidden hid them from us too.
So you get her to find it with the.
Yeah, if we
Yeah.
find one, then we'll have her plunk it so we can find it, because she can walk right back with the stick and find it.
Yeah, there's wells down by the river down here too.
Yeah, I have all the sheets, so I know how many there's supposed to be, and I have an idea, because I remember doing it with Obi.
I knew where they all were years ago, but there's one at the end of there's a gravel driveway that goes in off of Pinecrest Road into the sand pit.
Yeah.
And there's one lost down there, and I could never find it. I looked for it for years. There's one in there, but I was never able to find it again. Things changed enough that I could never find it.
Yeah.
But all the others, we had them all flagged and had orange tape on. Did you ever do any of those readings monthly?
I used to go out and plunk them, yeah.
Yeah. Alright, well, we used to map the whole water table through all these wells here.
Yeah.
What we tried to do was we'd run the wells so that we were kind of, wherever the water table was recovering, we'd turn that well on that day, you know, so then we'd rest, say Norman Avenue, would come up over a couple days and would swap them back and forth.
Yeah.
So. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that one is one you submitted for funding, right? It was to actually conduct, you know, the pilot test.
Yeah.
So we'll be ready to go with that, you know, provided. Just for my information, when is that happening? What meeting?
It's May, like, 9th, so it's early in May.
It's early this year.
Yeah, I don't have my.
Okay.
No, it's early. It's like May 9th.
Okay.
Annual salary?
Yeah,
Just, I mean, I can probably find it on the website too, so don't
I'll
worry.
know in a second.
Okay. So then when, and that would, the funds would then be available July 1st? Is that
Yes.
how it works?
Yeah.
Okay. Just more for, you know, planning purposes, you know, as we're kind of mapping out, you know, if you're working through your
Future
roadmap.
workload.
Yeah, when do you need us ready to go? It's good to know.
It's May 9th.
Man, perfect, thank you. The next one I have on my list is the asset management. Is it all right to transition to that?
Yeah.
So we submitted a draft of the rate study write-up. So as you may recall, the asset management study we completed, you know, a while ago now. And the one piece that was kind of out there was the rate study. That's one of the requirements for the asset management program. And we've now kind of looked at that, I think, 3 times. So I think the first time we had done it, we met with Wayne, kind of went through all of the budget planning piece. But there was so much kind of influx regarding the capital investments the community was going to need to spend. That was around the time we kind of caught wind that there was the iron and manganese and also the PFAS. And as you know, the PFAS really blew up everything when we had to kind of take a pause and figure out what the short-term and long-term solutions in, you know, town were for PFAS. So that we kind of did a second iteration of what the rates, you know, rate structure change would be. And then we just, again, last week finalized the third iteration, which was to kind of take into account the DEP feedback. So as you know, at this point, we've gotten through DEP a short-term PFAS plan approved, a long-term compliance submittal approved. That was a response to the notice of non-compliance. We have a approval to do the short-term PFAS improvements at Manly. And then we have the pilot test proposal for the Cedar Street. So those are a whole lot of approvals over the last several months we've got from DEP that kind of changed the landscape and the timing and the investments that, you know, we could be looking at over the next 5 years. So the most recent iteration of that took that all into account, in addition to some good discussions we had last time I was here, where we were talking about some alternative funding opportunities, whether it was earmarked funds through ARPA, or if I recall, I don't remember where it was coming from, but there was a fund that was available for the short-term piece. You know, it's going to be up to, you know, $350,000.
That was from the state, but it was less, it came in less than that, right? Didn't that-
So there's 2 pieces, the ARPA money, and then there's a piece from the state which got rolled to the DEP. I have paperwork to chase it one
Yeah,
time.
but didn't, that was what they were talking about, like around 350, but didn't it get turned down to like?
They took out 100,000 because the state gave 100,000, but it got turned over, it could be in that SRF or trying to.
Oh, the SRF?
Yeah, but I have paperwork, they know about it, and I have a contact name.
Okay. So all of those things kind of impact the bottom line. So, I mean, certainly we'll work with you for however you want to leave that piece, but we would recommend maybe coming to a place where we understand that this is still a bit of a moving target. But in terms of capturing the Mass DEP requirements, we all come to a place where, you know, the rate study is what it is right now, which is all it can be, right, as a snapshot in time. If this is how we're planning to move forward, kind of close out the asset management plan. Because at this point, that's all that's holding you up from getting the final reimbursement,
Yeah.
right? Because you've been paying the bills all along. So if we can get something submitted so that it closes the book on DEP, we can get reimbursement. By all means, we are more than happy to continue to come in, have conversations. I think we're probably at the point where, outside of one of these meetings, a big workshop, so we can find out, some of the assumptions we make might not be what you consider to be best for your community. One of the
So
things,
this, quick question, so this going in with the grant to close that out,
yeah,
doesn't tie us into what's in here?
correct. This is just an analysis to show DEP that we understand the costs and that this is how we're planning on funding them. So this isn't by any means an obligation to any specific rate structure. It's just more a piece of the planning process for them. But I think we should come to a place where, I guess at least what we have here, we all agree is a good framework for moving the conversation forward. We don't want to submit anything that fundamentally doesn't match your philosophy. For example, the first thing we looked at was revenue is X. We projected out for 5 years, assuming all of these projects were happening, what your revenue would be, and we find what year that kind of breaks. Like, when do you run into a deficit? When is your deficit the largest? And then what is your revenue gap? And then from there, we figured out, okay, you'd have to increase rates by everyone by 37%. Well, no one can come out tomorrow and say, oh, your rates universally across the board are going up 37%, right? It's just not typically a feasible way to do it. So then what we then say, okay, so taking a step back from that, how do we make sure that the revenue coming from businesses is equal to the cost to produce water for businesses? How is the revenue collected from residents equal to the water produced for residents, so that we're not asking homeowners to pay for the business share and vice versa? And then it's a matter of, are the highest users paying the largest share of the water? And then, so what we boiled up to here is a recommendation of kind of like a hybrid model, where you take the structure you already have, which is kind of unique to West Bridgewater, the way you kind of break up, residential, multifamily residential. You have a couple, categories in there for business and agriculture that aren't necessarily the way, the tiered system that they kind of roll out there as the example would be. And so we try to kind of mimic the tiered part of that by having the rates ramp up the more water you use. So your highest users would pay more for the last gallon of water they're using than they would for the first gallon. In other words, you're setting a limit of saying, if you're using water in a conserving way, within that, 55 to 65 gallons per capita a day, you can expect your bill to be about X. And then the people who are using well in excess of that, some of their water might be, at a higher rate. And then your extreme users would have, yet another tier. So generally speaking, that was the approach we felt kind of was a good starting point for discussion. And now I think what is necessary is to kind of engage you, find out, what is that looking like? Is that, is this a good baseline for what you feel would be a new rates system? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I saw it at the end, I saw it in my email, but I didn't look at it till the end, and I just did the annual report so I can run through some numbers. I mean, their feelings are different to mine, but they make their decisions. I'll run some numbers and see how much it solidifies. I know that the residents will have a knee-jerk reaction to the rates going up, which means that they're gonna pull back on the usage hard, which it makes it hard, and then you can't tell what the weather's gonna be.
Yeah, so those are all completely, valid things that we see, and that's why oftentimes you try to get more of your revenue out of the base rather than out of the excess charges, because, like you say, those biggest users, all of a sudden their bill goes up, they pull back.
Right.
And sometimes a lot of that sticks, and sometimes it's elastic, and you get a dip and it springs back, as people kind of just revert back into their, their habits. But that's all unknown, and it's very hard, to kind of put stock in the unknown. We recognize that. So these are all the challenges when you're, if you don't mind me saying so, say, if you're behind on your rate increases, right? then sometimes the catch-up is a very challenging thing. And there's no one right answer for every community, and if we feel like we're behind on the rates, then it's a matter of strategizing, a way of catching up that works for the community and its ratepayers, and the water department and the board of commissioners. It's all, it's gonna have to be a custom solution.
Right.
So I'm happy to answer any and all questions as long as you want me on that. Alternatively, I'm happy to come in for a specific workshop. I can bring my spreadsheets with me and we can,
Oh, boy.
I don't have to, but if you want to see what happens if we do this.
But there's a lot here to try to look at this for the first time and then sit and try to
Yeah,
talk
they're just
about
seeing
it
it
with
now.
any, with any kind of, real understanding of where you're going.
Yep, I understand.
I did have one question, more on process with the other stuff. Manley Street long-term upgrades, mostly because of the PFAS.
Yeah,
There's no
Recently,
redundancy built in,
well,
so.
yeah, I know, I understand it, but recently, our PFAS numbers have gone back lower.
yeah, we saw that.
If they stay lower, and we still, I think would do the pilot testing anyway in case it goes the other way, but would we have a problem with DEP postponing the long-term upgrades if the numbers stayed?
Yeah, so I was actually just talking to people about that this morning. There were other communities that had a very similar drop at the exact same time. So we're kind of engaging different, communities and engineers and reaching out to, the engineer who does a lot of our, pilot studies, and I think at some point we'll engage DEP. But we're kind of monitoring this in real time too. One of the issues is, there's not a lot of data that goes back, multiple years to this issue. To our understanding, there haven't been any links to, say, seasonal variants to PFAS. So without understanding where it came from, we would suspect DEP would be a little bit hesitant to kind of backing off what they asked for in the non-compliance. That being said, where we are positioned is that we have an approved short-term solution that we would recommend moving forward with anyway. And that does buy us, in our opinion, some time to continue to monitor where your levels are in raw water while we're kind of conducting that. And I think the next step would be engaging DEP and saying, we're moving forward with the short-term plan. We're continuing to see this trend, beyond, at this point we have 1/4 of it being significantly lower, but even the quarter below that you had 0 violations, right? So that's 2 quarters in a row where we are in compliance, and the most recent being, getting closer down to 10. I think that we're at 13, 12 in the first quarter, so that's a very positive results. So we definitely agree that that's something to monitor and keep as part of the equation moving forward.
Yeah,
Well, that'd be a chunk of money to take out of the rate impact. That's
Right.
a couple $1 million, right?
somebody had told me that up on Manley Street, they had a trailer truck load of tires
So,
caught on fire, and they came in and they foamed the trailer truck to get the fire to stop burning instead of using water. And they got the fire out, but then they had foam everywhere, so the fire department came down with their hoses and washed all the foam down the catch basins, which that's feeds, I don't know how long it would take to get to our wells, but that's in our recharge area.
so I look at that, and I looked at, there's somebody else who was stockpiling a lot of material up there, which seems to have moved, and they're now storing trucks in there. It could be that, but I pulled my PFAS samples today, and I have to do all the stations, and I pulled new raws out of Manley Street, just to see where we're at.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, it makes you wonder if we got a slug from people not understanding, which I'm not blaming anybody, because I had never heard of this chemical before you know, it was brought to our attention, and we got firemen out there doing what they're supposed to do, put out a fire, but then they wash it down the catch basins, which I think that there should be an education going on to the fire department that if they do use foam, they have to use foam, that there's gotta be a different cleanup process than washing it down the drain, especially when it's near our wells.
Right, I think that's a big piece of it. And I think unfortunately a big piece of it has to be, you know, catching it at its source before it goes into our waterways, and that's really where.
Is the state doing anything along that line? I mean, they're mandating that we test it and treat it, and yet these fire departments are still using the foam. Is there any education on the?
That's my knowledge.
They have been reformulating some of the foams though.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
So to try to get, but they'll just find something else in there that's gonna be the same, you know,
Right.
5 years from
Yeah,
now,
but there
10
will be a
years from
different
now,
treatment.
there's gonna be another, yeah.
It'll be another treatment, but it'll be different. So then they'll say, oh, you gotta re-engineer it, you gotta pilot study it, because now the chemicals change. You know, if we dodge the bullet, I'd much rather wait and see if it's permanent or whether it's temporary, you know, before we go spending millions of dollars trying to do something, treat something that isn't really there.
yeah, completely agree, especially since even if it doesn't go down anymore, but stays where it is, that's gonna increase the life of the ion exchange media we're putting in for our short-term solution. Right, you could be essentially doubling the life of that system that we're putting, you know, hopefully putting in shortly, if you're reducing the loading by half. So it could be that short-term solution can, you know, buy you some time, and, you know, that would, you know, any time you can get with rates is, you know.
Well, because we don't have a lot of customers to spread that rate increase over.
I know,
So
right.
so if we can take out a couple $1 million out of the next 5 years.
Yeah.
That's a
Or
big,
more?
Well, I mean, the other piece is, you know, we plan to continue to go after funding, you know, the SRF applications, you know, those will be coming up on our radar soon. You know, for all of our clients, you know, we plan to,
But are those grants or are
What's
those loans?
SRF?
so SRF are loans.
Those are loans.
Yeah, so they're
So we
loans.
still gotta pay it back.
Still have to pay it back, but
Yeah.
it changes the
We want grants.
time.
We want grants, not loans.
Yeah, I understand. Unfortunately, what we're seeing in terms of the recent round of PFAS-related grants is and I don't know if it's a temporary shift or a long-term shift, but they shifted away from paying for pilots and treatment to reimbursing people for costs. So the one, you know, if you were in non-compliance and you had to send out bottled water, or you were renting a unit, those were the people who were being targeted the most recent round of grants. And we haven't heard back on the most recent one. We did put in some, figure every little bit helps, but to try to get some reimbursement for, you know, your costs, whether it was, you know, the short-term planning, installing the tap, you know, every little bit helps. So we did submit for that and haven't heard back. We think it was a pretty strong application, so we'll see.
These $10 million numbers affect a small town like this in a big way.
Right.
And I did hear back from Senator Markey's office, and most of it's being pushed towards the SRFs. It's
Yeah.
not, there's no, all that big talk.
All that does is
and
change it
nothing
to,
came of it.
And what
all that does is
this?
change
I thought
it to
there
a
was big-
mortgage. That's all that does.
I thought this Build Back Better had a big piece for water. You know,
It did, and they pushed it to the SRFs to let DEP deal with it. And there are, from what I read, there are a few forgivable loans, but you have to find them, and they're not standing out right now.
So it's still not known what money's gonna be there.
Yeah, I mean, we can look into a little bit more specific and see what the last round looked like, to kind of give you some examples. You know, sometimes there's a, you know, a portion that's, you know, forgivable, where, you know, you don't pay back the entire principal.
How many towns do you deal with that are as small as West Bridgewater with a public water supply on their own?
Yeah, I mean, a decent number. You know, just the size of our firm, most of our customers aren't Boston, you know, we kind of specialize in, you know, client care for, you know, small communities.
But this small, 7,000 people?
I mean, it's smaller side, yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say they're all the same size as West Bridgewater,
No. We're on the smaller side.
You are on the smaller side, yeah. And we have, some of our other clients are smaller size, or in New Hampshire, and it's not the exact same funding opportunities.
But less probably, requirements up there probably maybe.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot different
The
probably.
applications are a lot thinner, easier to pull together.
Yeah,
Mm.
a lot. Massachusetts has a way of complicating things and creating cost
Sometimes
issues.
it's just the people that are in DEP that just like to spend money, and they don't have to answer to the ratepayers, so they don't care. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's a consistent struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It always has been. It always has been.
Yeah, so no, I certainly understand that we haven't, given you enough time to digest that data yet. So whether it's, having me come back at another board meeting, or if you want to do, like I said, a more informal workshop where we can kind of go through the underlying data and talk about, I guess, what your ideas are, because, there's no rate structure we can do in a vacuum, we need your input.
I don't know I understand now it's all in the food supply too.
Yeah, the PFAS?
Yeah.
How could it not be?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's in
Basically
everything.
in everything.
yeah.
So what are they doing? Are they making
No,
food suppliers take it out?
no.
All completely valid questions that we're
Well,
asking.
it's probably not a lifetime exposure like your water coming in your house. That's why bottled water doesn't have to advertise what's in it.
Right?
They're beginning to look at the federal government, from what I've read, but, and they're doing we're part of the
Because I was reading about,
5, but.
what do you call it, organic farming?
Mm.
And they're looking, they're ruining organic farms because they can't have this in the soil, and they test for it.
Mhm.
And they're shutting down so they can only grow regular vegetables, they can't grow, what they're supposed to be natural, but I didn't realize that it was that much in the soil. It's
Yeah.
everywhere.
But I thought the limits were lifetime exposure,
Yes,
right? And so your house could be a lifetime exposure.
right.
You buy a vegetable from a vegetable stand, you're not gonna necessarily eat those
No, you're
vegetables
not
for a
gonna eat
lifetime.
Right.
So I don't know what it should affect.
But it seems to be in all the farms, so no matter where you get your vegetables from, you're gonna be exposed to it, just maybe on different levels each meal.
Right.
But yet there isn't much being done on the input, on the supply of this stuff getting into the system. Doesn't seem.
Certainly not enough focus from our standpoint.
Yeah, they got,
It's becoming a hot issue, but
Because if they stop the input, maybe at some point it would drop down.
right,
Well, they
exactly.
are banning them, but as they ban them, they create a new chain. So it's not, now the new chain is not regulated, so they get away with that for a few years, then they ban that one, and they create the next chain.
I think
That
that
is
they
one
ought to
big
do some
complex
good
stuff,
testing
but-
on it before they even allow them to do the new one, and then they know what they're dealing with, before they let them, how do they let them use a new chemical? Start using it, and then realize 4 years, 5 years later, that it's making people sick? Why don't they test the stuff so that they know what it is before they start using it? That would make more sense to me.
I think they just,
And then they come back to us and tell us, well, you gotta have everybody spend $1 million because we gotta get this stuff out, because we allowed them to put it in, and now you guys are gonna take it out. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
and we're gonna let them keep putting it in.
Yeah, and they're still putting it in. I gotta call you back about a meeting.
yeah, it's a complicated issue, and fortunately we find ourselves at the
Fix
front
it.
line.
I know.
All right,
Go back to the office tomorrow and fix it.
oh, if it was that easy, it'd be done by now. I promise. we hate having to, come in and come up with these expensive solutions and then go and fight for funds. It's a tough part of the business. And then on top of all that, there's supply chain issues and cost escalation, and it's really tough out there right now for a lot of communities. And Yeah,
Yeah, this is gonna be tough for this community, I think.
yeah.
But we're also gonna have to start thinking pretty soon about what we do with our rates to get this as we go into the next year, so we don't wanna keep putting that off. We should
Right.
sit down,
Oh, yeah, we got it.
get you in here. And whether it's at a meeting that we just plan on it taking a big chunk of a meeting, we schedule something separate. We do need to get that moving and
Sure.
get into it here.
How about I check in about a week and see if you guys have had time to digest and schedule something? Does that work?
Yeah, we gotta go over too, we collect a lot of money in fees. We gotta break that down, figure out how that money's coming in and being used,
Yeah.
how much is left over.
Well, yeah, if I bring my computer for the next talk, I can kind of show you like, all right, how much of the revenue is relying on the base, how much is coming from commercial, you can kind of break those numbers down, all the different ways that might impact your, decision making and, kind of match your philosophy on how it should be done. I think that could be a productive meeting.
Oh, sounds good.
Well, what we've done over the years is we made deals like with different sectors of the customers that we have. First it was builders, and we went to build another well, and the town meeting turned us down because they didn't want to pay for a new well, so contractors could keep building houses. They said, just stop building houses. Put a moratorium on building. Because I'm not gonna spend my money so that some contractor could build houses and make money, because they're not giving me any of their profits. So then we got voted down. We went and talked to the contractors and we said, we're gonna put a fee in so we can build the well, and then you guys are gonna have to pay for it. Which the builders were all said, well, how much is that? And we said, probably, I don't know, it was like $3,000 to $5,000. I said, well, that doesn't make any difference because it's gonna cost us that to put a well in anyways. If you don't supply us the water, we'd much rather have you supply the water than us having to put a well in. So we started with the tie-in fees years ago. And then the industrial customers wanted a water tank up on Manley Street, up on Walnut Street to feed Manley Street because their insurance premiums were out of sight. So they had huge savings that they could make if we built the tank. Well, the town meeting said, we're not gonna build them a tank. They're industrial customers, why are, the residential rates paying for it? So we went back and we talked to the industrial customers, and they said, one guy said he was gonna save $50,000 a year in premiums if we put a bigger main and had more water for him, so he could have a sprinkler system. So I said, so if you paid us $5,000 a year, you wouldn't have a problem. And he says, I wouldn't have a problem. If you save me 50, I'll give you 5 of it every year. I don't, that's a good deal. Yeah. So we put in sprinkler fees. So every year we charge them for the risers. And then we also have a tie-in fee when you put a sprinkler system in, because we've got to build and we got to have the tank, and we've got to paint the tank and inspect the tank. And we don't need, what do we have, almost 6 million gallons of storage. We don't need that to put on a residential house. That's all there for the industrial customers. Right. So we put in, based on square footage, if you build a building, you're gonna contribute toward these tanks. So we have large tie-in fees. So those money that we collect there actually pays for that water tank up on Walnut Street, and pays 66% of the maintenance of the tank, and the residential customers take care of the difference on the painting of the tank. Yeah. And that just comes on the regular water, the water rate. But that other money is collected separately. And right now, I'm trying to get where we're at broken down into how much we collect every year and see what we got. Now, we paid, we had collected an extra $100,000 from the industrial customers on risers and things like that. So we paid down the tank painting bond so we paid off $100,000 to save on interest. So we can get rid of that bond that we have on the tank painting. So there is other revenues. That's the way we've always approached it. There's other revenues that pay for the budget, and the rate just pays for the labor and the chemicals, electricity, and things like that, the day-to-day operation.
Right.
So
Yeah, makes sense.
we just have to take that, and there's quite a bit of money that comes in every year in those fees. So that has to be all figured in there.
Yeah, so we did our best to capture that, but we obviously don't have the intimate knowledge of those, items like you do. So that's another thing maybe we take a look at when we come back and make sure we're appropriately accounting for all those. I know we carried, sprinkler fees in here, but if there are other, connection fees that are a reliable, consistent source of income, then those are things that, we want to make sure are captured in here. So, we're accounting for the revenue appropriately.
And the other thing I'm concerned about is we can't support the water rate with those fees that we bring in from the industrial customers, because they're paying some pretty hefty fees to support the tank and the painting of the tank and that type stuff. And we can't take that money from what they're paying in to drop the water rate. That isn't fair. So we need to make sure that what the industrial and the business customers are paying stays in that category, and the contractors who are paying for the new wells, that money isn't used to support the water rate. That money that comes in is used to pay for new expansion of new wells.
Yeah, that's a big part of the analysis, is every time we ran a scenario, we calculated out the revenue per use group, and then we know what the water use is per, use group, and we know what it costs you to produce the water, and we can make sure that the percent of the burden matches the, percent of the cost. And that's a big part of it, that's important to many communities, is that, you don't have businesses who feel like they're paying more than their share, or vice versa. So that's part of what makes these things so challenging, is striking all of those balances. Not everybody's pocketbook is set the same either. So there are lots of nuance that make it a very challenging process.
Well, that's what we try to do. We were trying to match the benefits of us building a tank. It doesn't benefit the residential customers as much as it did the business customers, so,
Yeah.
and they were willing to pay for it, but it helped them a lot, so. And they never complained.
Yeah.
So do you have any other?
So I think the only other
Topics?
one I had on here was just the Walnut Tank. I know we're just awaiting funding on that.
Yes.
But then there's, the altitude project is on our radar as well.
Yeah.
I think that covered all the items I had. But I appreciate the opportunity to come in and kind of update you on everything. I know there's a lot going on.
Always a lot going on.
Right, it's not easy, is it? So I'll reach out in about a week, if we've had time to digest it. By then we'll kind of talk about the next step there. In the meantime, we're gonna kind of move on with the short-term piece that was funded. We're trying to keep an eye on the timing of things, just to make sure we don't get caught behind the 8 ball on the availability of pipe and.
On the iron and manganese treatment plant, when are they looking at lowering the amount of iron and manganese that we can have in the water?
Oh, I don't know.
You
I don't
don't
know that.
I heard that they were gonna drop the amount of
They're
iron
gonna
and
lower the
manganese,
limit.
but they haven't
Yeah.
given you an idea yet?
Not that I've heard, but I can look into it.
The only one I heard was the secondary for manganese possibly becoming an MCL.
Did you have the altitude valve project in the capital costs, in the stuff for the rates?
It is in there, yeah.
It is, okay.
That was one of the things that kind of changed is, you know, instead of it being kind of a study, it's now the altitude valve project as opposed to,
Yeah, that's something that we definitely need. So we can get better use of that other water tank.
Or any use,
Yeah.
right?
Stop filling it up.
I mean, if the three businesses had ended up down at the end of Manley Street, we might have had enough draw that it would have worked the way it was.
If what, Wayne?
If the three businesses that were supposed to go down there, Horizon Beverage was a very big building. You know, they're in Norton now, and the two dealerships are over in Brockton on the other side of the line.
So we would've used enough that it would've.
I think it would have drawn enough to pull it down some, and then we would have got more fluctuation out of it.
I mean, what's our liability now if there's a fire on Manley Street?
Well, they all existed long before, so, I mean, there's water available.
That's the trouble with industrial customers, they don't use a lot of water when you look at the size of their buildings, but you've gotta have so much water sitting there at their demand as soon as they have a fire. And they may never have a fire, but you've gotta have millions of gallons of water that's available to them so that they get a decent fire protection, right?
we need to be able to turn that water over so that it doesn't.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it's a very challenging balance.
But then you send out the bills and it's, you know, I look at the industrial bills and, you know, $500, $800, $1,000. They're not a lot of money, but you've got millions and millions of dollars worth of tank and painting, and just the paint job is over $1 million, so. You know, the people don't understand how much that all costs. All right, anybody got any more questions for him?
No.
No? All right, well, thank you very much for
Thank you
coming
very much,
in.
appreciate it.
We
I'll see you guys again
appreciate it.
soon.
Yeah.
Alright, thank you.
Thank you.
So, I guess we went over a lot of this stuff already. How about the Walnut Street, not Walnut Street, how about Lincoln Street project? Is
I
that?
haven't, I know they issued a whole pile of drawings, cause I have an email that went, but it wasn't the water part of it, it was more the other parts. And they didn't hand out a drawing set, they just allowed you to download them, which doesn't, I can't look at a full-size drawing, you know, an E-size drawing on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. But he hasn't gotten back to me still.
Yeah, you had no response.
No, Rich.
And no response on the size of the domestic line for that
No,
building?
so it's on them, they haven't reached back.
So they're gonna need approval from us before they even start that intersection, aren't they?
Yeah,
And they're still not reaching out.
no,
I mean, I'm thinking they're gonna start any time now.
well, there's nothing they can do, because
Because we're not gonna let them tie in until they.
the first thing he
get in
wanted
touch
to do was
with us.
he wanted the pipes in the ground before he did much of anything else.
Yeah.
Which you would think he'd
Well,
widen it first, because.
I would think they're gonna start right about now.
They're gonna tear that house down first.
Yeah, and I think it still has electricity, because I emailed him during the winter time, and I says, you know, that house still has water, and it's being heated, because we could see smoke coming out of the chimney. So
Is
he
there a
didn't
meter
even
on
know
it
that.
still? Is there a meter? Still?
We shut off the water to it, we had to go out and dig up the curb stop, because it was bent over, but we shut it, the water's off to it.
Do you pull the meter or?
No, because we didn't get into the house yet. When they apply for a demo permit, then we'll get in and get it.
So they already bought that house.
As far as I know, yeah, you know,
Right past
he's
business.
into it for a lot of money. That and the other house, the cat lady's house.
Yeah.
Whose house?
It's up on, it's almost opposite the old Blooms or GG's now. You'll see there's a boarded up house up there.
On Lincoln Street?
Yeah, it's next to the hairdresser, I believe.
Yeah, no, on 106.
Yeah, yeah. It was part of the property, they didn't,
Part of which property?
it was part of the Cumberland Farms, whoever owned that property prior to. It
You're
was,
talking the house on the other corner?
no, well,
Oh.
basically it's on the corner, but it's not. It's opposite Gigi's pretty much.
That one, okay. Yeah, oh, it's the only one there on the corner, it was a two-family one, the gray one?
Yeah, I don't know what color it is, but,
So they got both of them on the corner, even
Yeah,
though
right,
the corner's kinda vacant.
yeah, cause he plans on putting a strip mall or something in there.
There's no sign of a start date, no.
No,
was
I
there
haven't
any-
heard anything. And he can't touch our pipes till he comes to us, so.
What was the reason for the new set of plans? Are they still trying to get approval from the planning board, or?
That I can't tell you, I mean, I can copy this, but it doesn't really, it's just he issued plans out and that there were still, it's the road layout, the sidewalk, curb ties,
That's a list of the changes on the plans?
yeah.
Can you look at the plans enough just to tell if the sidewalk goes all the way to South Elm Street?
I haven't pulled them down yet, because I just haven't had time.
And they're supposed to bring full-size site plan there.
Yeah, I haven't received anything more.
I talked to David Gagney about it. I told him, I said, I haven't seen any plans where you got your sidewalk all the way down, and he said he wasn't worried about it because the owner told him that it was gonna go all the way down. So, I said, well, our water main's going down to the end of the driveway, we're trying to negotiate something the rest of the way down, and we'd like to be underneath the sidewalk, but, I said, I don't think you really got a sidewalk there the rest of the way down. He didn't seem to be too concerned about it. He said it'll be there. So,
Well, it's part of the TIF, it's supposed to be, so.
yeah,
This doesn't seem like it was buttoned down,
No.
right?
Then it,
I would think that it should have been something there with what the planning board approved.
Well, the selectmen wanted it, didn't they, originally?
Yeah, with the selectmen wanted it.
I would think it would be, like, on the plans, like, that's a major
I would
part
think
of the
so.
project.
Alright.
I mean, what else is the town getting out of it for the TIF? It was just that sidewalk, right?
Yeah, I don't think they get much of anything else, no.
The intersection,
Yeah,
the intersection,
Oh,
relocating the intersection.
yeah.
I don't know that that's a plus or a minus. Yeah. And it
it's already
definitely,
backed up to the highway.
I'm saying, either way, it's not gonna be worth the disruption it's gonna cause,
But they
build it.
usually do that anyways. Without a tip, they just, if a company's going in there, they need a light, they.
And you sent another notice to them that we wanted to talk to them, right?
Yeah,
I think it's held up in the MEPA process. They were hot and heavy with Concom, and then all of a sudden they backed off and they said, when do you need all this stuff by? And they said, oh, we're held up on this, so they weren't pushing it so much. So, and Concom was waiting for the same stuff on the improvements to 106, because they needed to give them all kinds of watershed information on what they're gonna do.
Well, they'll be tied up with MEPA for a while. Alright. Anything else you see on here, Wayne, that we've got to discuss tonight?
no, Frank Elliott, I haven't heard anything from them. I think they're still trying to meet with the planning board. They haven't been able to arrange that yet. And capital's already submitted, so we're just waiting for town meeting.
Alright, is there some day when we can, Carrie, you and I can get together, we can decipher these numbers?
Yeah, I should be at the meeting Wednesday. Yeah, pretty much the early part of this week. We can sit down.
You gonna be in all this week, Terry? See if we
I
can-
I take lunch around 1:40 to 2:40 to pick my daughter up at school.
I'll give you a buzz, and tomorrow I'm gonna be busy, but after that, maybe I can get in, maybe on Wednesday. Come in and we'll see if we can bang these numbers out, see where we're at. All right. posting, anything on that one?
Well, I had her edit it again, but I have two people, I'll just ask Art if he's seen these two people and then see if he,
I haven't seen anything yet. You emailed?
yeah, there's been about 4 rounds of stuff come out, but out of them all, I think I just, I picked out 2 people that seen them.
When did
They
you
have
send
some
them?
electrical stuff. She's been sending, I think I just deleted one, well, I didn't delete them, I still have them, I can forward them to you if you're not getting them.
I don't remember seeing anything.
I got one today, and I think I got one Friday or Thursday.
Yeah, forward what you have, I just don't recall.
All right.
I saw stuff from you on the Capitol, but I don't remember
Yeah.
seeing anything on.
I haven't seen
Alright.
his name on it.
Resumes.
Oh, alright,
Sue and
that's-
I,
alright. I'll
unless
forward
you
them.
blind copies and I
Okay.
don't know.
I'll forward them off to you, I mean, most of them drop right out,
But you got a couple that
but
will.
I thought there were 2
Potential.
that worth looking at.
Before I call for a motion to adjourn, anybody got anything else they want to discuss that we can bring up?
Do we want to have the guest introduce himself?
Sure.
I'm Dylan Cragen, WB Water Commissioner, and nice to see it in action, live and in action. I've been watching all the meetings for a number of years, so pretty well informed.
Yeah, well, it'll be good. Glad to see you here,
Thank you.
see what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And the election's next week.
April 9th.
Isn't it Saturday?
And you can't wait,
Yeah,
right, Tom?
Saturday.
Wayne, you got anything?
No, I don't have.
Kerry?
Next meeting will be Monday, April,
Is that the Patriots holiday?
yeah, it's actually Tuesday the 19th.
The 19th?
Yeah, because the 18th is Patriots Day.
So we meet twice a month, the first and third Mondays. If there's a holiday, we usually meet on Tuesday.
Okay.
So do I hear a
Want to
motion?
make the motion, Tom?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.